Okay, hello. Our next speaker, our next session is Dialed, Distributed Index of All Asterisks, Library Location and Event Data, presented by Dan Scott. Dan Scott is the systems librarian at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario. He works toward the freedom of software and data by contributing to projects such as the Evergreen library system and the schema.org vocabulary. So let's give a warm welcome to Dan Scott.
Alrighty. So let's see, where are we? We are there. Yeah, Laurentian University. Yay, made it all the way from Sudbury. It's awesome to be at Access this year in Toronto. So, as has been mentioned, you might know me from my work on schema.org and incorporating that into such library systems as Evergreen, Koa, and Viewfind. I was really enthusiastic early on about the possibility of connecting our collections to the web using structured data to connect items to libraries so that regular search engines could understand them and serve them up to regular users. And even if that meant digging into work groups, defining some new terms, and bending some fairly commercially oriented definitions to our will. And could you reload the slides, please? And do a refresh, because we should have a better linear format. You'll have to probably hit escape and do a total refresh. Hello, live stream. Great to see you out there. This is the problem with using a little remote like this with a reveal.js layout. In any case, I'll keep on talking. So you can take a look at Evergreen today and see an extremely rich set of structured data that's actually linked data. And you'll find that there are offers listed that will link to, there we go, that link off to the seller, which is, in this case, a library, right? Very commercial terms, but they work mostly for our purposes. But it turns out that seller was a bit of a sticking point, not because of the commercial terms, but largely because there's very little good points to link to satisfy the requirement for a seller. So there is schema.org library. Anyone have a guess at how many domains are running or have exposed schema.org library?
0.
Okay, that's a good guess. 0 is a good guess. We've got between 100 and 1,000 domains at this point on the entire World Wide Web that have exposed this. You know, we're like 4 years into schema.org. So any guesses on museums? 0 is closer in this case. Archive, not yet defined, but Richard Wallace is working on it with a work group. So if you're interested in archives and all the properties and classes, go talk with Richard and get hooked up with that. And just by way of comparison, cemetery is at the same level as museum right now. So we've got some work to do. Now, in the case of Evergreen, we actually expose library data today because it is an integrated library system. Daleks, say what you will. So information like opening hours and addresses, contact information are all built into Evergreen, and so we can expose that as structured data, and we've got effectively a URI with structured data. So this is just a cut-down version of what we expose by default. But most other ILSs are either less integrated or less customizable. So if we could just link to a source of data about the library, that would suffice, if only there was such a source of data. So the term meta-institutional data does exist. It's very infrequently used, and I think maybe we need to talk about it a little bit more, because this should be right in our wheelhouse, right? We have metadata for our collections. We focus on the items in our collections with MARC, Dublin Core, EAD, mods, METs, RDA, BibFrame, add-on, Portland Common Data Model. We should be great at providing metadata for our institutions as well. Meta-institutional data is a thing, but most of our own library web pages don't offer any linked open data about the library itself. So you would think that we'd be able to go to our friends at OCLC for the WorldCat registry. I mean, it defines itself as the authoritative source for institutional metadata, but there's a couple of problems there. The license by default is non-commercial, which restricts a lot of uses. You can negotiate, but even if you did negotiate a license that allows for whatever you can term as commercial uses, most of the data that you'll find there is out of date, and you won't actually find a whole lot of data. I think looking for the Toronto Public Libraries, there's like 3 entries for a system that has 100 branches. That's problematic. So really, why should you care? So I'm a big proponent of common search engines being the way that people get access to information. Increasingly, people are searching on mobile devices, they might be searching on smartwatches, and they're getting funneled through things like Google, Bing, and Yahoo. And when they search for their local library, they should get accurate information back about it. But right now, because there isn't really a good source of data for information about your libraries, archives, and museums, resources like Google Maps and Big Maps have to rely on a hodgepodge of data that they're culling from social media sites like Google+, from Foursquare in the case of Bing Maps, which is really sketchy, drive-by edits by crowdsourcing or outsourcing, if you will, or attempted parses of the human-oriented markup that occur on web pages. And like it or not, this is what is considered authoritative by people who are getting the answers back. If Google Maps has the right name and location, but says your library is closed today because it couldn't figure out that your web page had a set of hours for the summer and a set of hours for the fall, it hasn't got any guidance in terms of how to figure that out, then whoever's seeing that pop up probably isn't going to make the extra effort to click through to the website to find your hours, to double check to make sure that they can't go to your library. You might have just missed out on a patron. So this was pretty intense and intimidating, and I almost gave up on the idea of convincing thousands of libraries and archives in Canada to give up to adopt schema.org for their most basic web pages. It's a lot of inertia. But in January, I was at SuperConference, and some of the members of the Royal Society of Canada expert panel report on the future of libraries presented their work. And one of those pieces was some work by the Canadian Writing Research Collaboratory, mentioned as QUIRC a couple of times yesterday, which was a map of the 5,000 or approximately 5,000 libraries and archives in Canada. So the work on that map wrapped up in June 2014, and it's got some structured data exposed there as well. You can get the latitude, longitude data for every one of the branches or every one of the institutions. Most of them have URLs. This is a great starting point, right? But it was almost entirely a manual effort. So it was dated June 2014, and as the clock continues to tick, things continue to rot. And it drives me crazy, and it probably should drive you crazy, that despite all that effort, and despite more than 90% of those entries having URLs, we can't just do a crawl of all those sites and update this resource, this really valuable resource, with updated, fresh data. So I was really happy to be able to meet Susan Brown, who's been spearheading the QUIRC effort this summer. And she recognizes this is a problem. She understands the value of linked open data, and she wants to collaborate on solutions to keeping the data fresh and relevant. So she really gave me a burst of enthusiasm and energy to keep on going. So if you read the session description, you'll see that it states that I have been leading an effort through the summer of 2015. Unfortunately, I'm not as good as the digital humanists, which I'm supposed to avoid the term humanists because they might not all be humanists, so humanoid sounds nicer. I was pretty fired up about this back in January, and I did apply for a grant to try and support 2 full-time comp sci students who would help me in creating library website templates for Drupal, Joomla, other common popular CMSs that would incorporate that meta-institutional data right out of the box, and then also create a portal that would aggregate the data from the sites that have adopted it and provide associated education and advocacy efforts. In the end, the rejection that I got did contain Michael Geist's signature, so that's pretty cool. But I need to adjust your expectations about what you're seeing here. So on the education efforts, I did make some progress. So if you like crisply written prose, not thanks to my writing, but thanks to the editors at the Partnership Journal, An article was published this summer that walks step by step through the augmentation of an actual library website taken from the Greater Sudbury Public Library South Branch. Hi, Sudbury! That shows how to augment it to include linked data, including location, contact info, opening hours, and event information. But some people learn more by demonstration, seeing the before and after directly. And does anyone recognize what this is? Okay, this was an effort from, I think, 2011. Influx, along with Amanda Etches was part of Influx at that time, I think, created something called the library one-pager. The idea that you could have all the critical information about your library on a single page, right, to try and destroy the mass of websites that made things confusing. So I decided to take the library one-pager and augment that with schema.org linked data to show how this could happen relatively easily. So it's a single 16-line diff between the library one-pager and the library one-pager plus schema.org. And you can see the links to where that stuff lives on the page. And my hope is, by seeing how little was required to make the library one-pager a publisher of linked open meta-institutional data, you can apply the same tactics to your own library web pages. So just to have some code in an Access presentation, right? Or at least I do. So reality check. How many people use a static HTML library site? Yeah, I didn't think so. And how many use a CMS? Yeah, that's about what I thought. And how many of you want a really deep knowledge of RDFA and HTML to be the minimum bar for people to be able to do this? Hey, yes, we have a few people who are, technical elitists, I guess. Fine. So on that front, I decided to try and take the one-pager website and create a Drupal theme out of it. So the idea was that I wanted to make it possible for you to just use the widgets that exist in Drupal or contributed modules and have it generate the linked data under the covers so that you don't even have to think about it. And so I did manage to get that working as well. It's not perfect. A Drupal expert will probably find lots of things that I should not have done and be able to clean up those rough edges pretty quickly. And it's still the same warning with the one-pager that this is not something that you should just take and adopt and roll out. It, again, is a proof of concept. You can take the modules, certainly, take some of the themes and the ideas and make it work for your purposes, but you need to adapt it to your environment. So as an example, this is what the location and contact info widget looks like. You just type in your email, you just type in your phone number, and you type in the address information, and it magically creates the tell URIs and the mail to email and the right property names and puts it all in the classes that are expected by schema.org. So it really isn't hard. You don't need to redesign your website when you do this. Just keep all the blemishes and warts that you already know exist and add the things in. That's one of the big problems that people have as soon as they look at, oh, I'm going to change a little bit of HTML. Oh, I just need to do this. And then I've got a committee, and then we're redesigning the website. No, you don't need to do that. TPL, you redesigned your website again recently. You can keep that same design and just add a little bit more into it. Fair enough. So incentive-wise, why are we doing this again? Cleaner data for those personal agents that were promised in Tim Berners-Lee's seminal article from 2001. So Siri and OK Google. We have the possibility of now pulling in data into StreetMap, OpenStreetMap, Wikidata, and of course the LED cloud, and I'm not going to include a depiction of that diagram. And we can actually make dialed.ca a possibility. So dialed is, as the title suggested, the distributed index of all library location event data, and the all is an asterisk because, of course, it's never going to be complete, or distributed index of archives and libraries location event data. So if you go to dialed.ca right now, you'll just see a link to this presentation and the examples and the repositories. What I hope that can build into is to build on Quirk's efforts and start generating data based on regular crawls of everybody who's going to go home from this and start making this happen. So another important part is advocacy. So tentatively, Susan and I have been talking about partnering on advocacy efforts. I have been in initial discussions with the Southern Ontario Library Service and Ontario Library Services North, or at least the representatives there, that they collectively are responsible for the infrastructure for hundreds of library websites. So to hit them would be, or get them to adopt this would be a great first step. And of course, coming to Access and connecting with you people is one of the most fantastic ways to magnify impact. So we do have some Toronto Public Library people here, right? Nobody's going to volunteer to say that they are. You already do have Open Graph Protocol metadata on your web pages, which makes it show up nicely in Facebook, which is great. But if you focus a little bit more on utility, you can also get opening hours and location and contact information in there, which would be really useful for all kinds of other purposes as well. And if we got TPL on board, that'd be another 100 branches in one shot. Do we have any BC Libraries Co-op people here today? Okay. You're on the live stream. I know you are. We will talk. So you are my heroes. I love Access. I love the people at Access. You can all make amazing things happen. So let's make this happen. Please spread the word, share your skills, and let's make meta-institutional data for libraries and archives a real thing. All right? So, questions? There's a question in the front. Run, John, run! This is the best part of Access for me right now.
At the University of Ottawa Library, I think we have a similar issue that you have at Laurentian with having that stuff handle bilingualism.
Right.
How are you approaching it at Laurentian?
Well, that's a great question, because anybody who wants to check on my hypocrisy level will have already gone to Laurentian.ca library and checked it out and seen, like, there's no structured data there at all. So why is this guy even talking to us? Answer for that is because it took me 2 years, but I think as of last week, I finally got access to the template within our overall university library website that I can affect some of the content of the page. So the plan there is have the exact same data being represented as structured data. The nice thing about structured data is that it tends to be, structured or linked data is that it tends to work in multiple languages, and in the very worst case scenario, I can say laurentian.ca/library is the same as laurentien.ca/bibliothèque. And so we've got the same as connection, which will say, hey, these are both representations of the same entity, and we could even add in the @enca, @fr.ca distinguishers to it. So it'll be the same in either case. In my defense, I'll say we run Evergreen, so we already have a description of all the linked data for Evergreen, for our libraries in English and French. It's just not living on our library homepage. So, but it will. It will. Now, a question at the back, so John can run back there. There isn't one, but I'm hoping. All right. Thank you very much.